You spent decades working to get to this day, and when it finally came, something felt wrong. It wasn't the money, it wasn't your health, it was something nobody warned you about. Something that is quietly destroying the quality of life of millions of Americans who earned exactly what they always wanted. Today I'm going to tell you what that thing is called and what you can do about it. There's a statistic I need you to hear. In 2025, a historic record of 4.18 million Americans turned 65. 11,400 people a day crossing into retirement. The largest number ever recorded in this country. This is what researchers call peak 65, the peak of the retirement wave from the baby boomer generation. And what nobody is talking about when it comes to these millions of people is this. A 2025 study found that 20.5% of them said they simply were not prepared, not financially, emotionally. Because the financial side is what everyone teaches. The emotional side is what nobody mentions. Think about it. You spent 30, 40 years of your life being defined by what you did. Your title, your company, your team, your routine. It was 6 in the morning with a reason to get up. It was coffee with your co-workers. It was the feeling that what you did actually mattered. And then, on a single day, the day of the retirement party, the cake, the balloon that said, "Congratulations on your retirement," all of that was gone, not gradually, overnight. The 67-year-old former executive described it this way. I went from being someone who made important decisions affecting hundreds of people to someone whose biggest decision was what to have for lunch. That has a name. Psychology calls it post-retirement identity crisis, and it is far more common than you think. A study published in the scientific journal The Gerontologist found that 41% of retirees experienced moderate to severe identity disruption within the first year of retirement. 41%. That is not a small group. That is nearly half of all the people going through the same thing you might be going through right now, or the thing you don't want to admit you're going through. Their 2021 AARP survey was even more direct. 61% of retirees reported struggling with feelings of purposelessness after leaving the workforce. And an article in the Harvard Business Review confirmed what many people feel but can't quite put into words. 72% of people before retirement said their job gave them a strong sense of purpose. After retirement, that number dropped to 34%, nearly half the purpose. Gone. But here's what I need you to understand, and what most people never tell you. You didn't lose your purpose because you got old. You lost your purpose because you confused the vehicle with the destination. Work was not the purpose. Work was the vehicle that delivered the purpose. And when the vehicle disappeared, you were left with no idea how to get to the same place by a different road. That is what researchers call the post-retirement existential vacuum. And it shows up differently for different people. Maybe for you it's the unsettling silence of a Monday morning with nowhere you have to be. Maybe it's the discomfort when someone asks, "So what do you do?" and you don't know what to say anymore. Maybe it's that feeling that the days are moving too fast, but fast toward what exactly? Toward where? Or maybe it's simpler and more painful than any of that. You just stopped feeling like you matter. That is real. And it hurts as much as anything else. The problem gets even harder when you add loneliness to the picture. Because when you lose work, you don't just lose your identity. You lose the entire social structure that came with it. Your colleagues, the hallway conversations, the emails coming in, the meeting you complained about, but that proved someone needed you there. The numbers are heavy. In 2025, 41% of Americans in their 60s reported feeling lonely, up from 32% in 2021. A nationwide survey found that 57% of older adults in the United States feel lonely. In May of 2023, the United States Surgeon General himself, Dr. Vivek Murthy, released an official report declaring an epidemic of loneliness and isolation in this country. Not a concerning trend, an epidemic. The word they use for conditions that are out of control. And Dr. Murthy said something you need to hear clearly. Loneliness affects mortality at the same level as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is not an exaggeration. That is science. Published, peer-reviewed, confirmed. Social isolation among older adults generates $6.7 billion in excess annual Medicare spending. Because loneliness makes you sick, literally. Now I need to talk about something a lot of people would rather avoid. The data on suicide among older men in the United States is devastating, and the silence around it is part of the problem. Men aged 75 and older have the highest suicide rate of any age group in the United States, 40.7 deaths per 100,000 people. The national average is 14.1. Among men 65 and older, the rate is 6 times higher than among women of the same age. Between 2021 and 2022, suicide deaths increased by 8.1% among people 65 and older. Dr. Yates Conwell, a psychiatry professor at the University of Rochester Medical Center, identified what he calls the 5 Ds that explain this risk: depression, disease, disability, disconnection, and access to deadly means. But there is one factor he singled out specifically: retirement. Because many American men build their entire identity around their work. And when that disappears, they don't have the emotional tools to process the loss. Culturally, they were never taught to ask for help, never taught to be vulnerable. If you are suffering in silence or you know someone who is, the number 988 exists for exactly this. You call or text any hour, any day, no judgment. Now I want to talk about what comes after the crash. There is a way through, and it is closer than you think. Psychologists who study retirement describe a process with clearly defined phases. The first is the honeymoon, those first weeks or months of pure freedom. Nothing to do, no obligations. It feels wonderful. And then, the honeymoon ends. Researchers call the next phase disenchantment. That's when the gap between what you imagined retirement would be and what it actually is becomes impossible to ignore. Days that blur together. The emptiness of mornings with no direction. But that phase is not permanent.
That's it. Keep
After
going.
disenchantment comes what they call reorientation. That's when you stop trying to recreate the life you had and start building the life you actually want. Research shows that most people find that path within the first year. So how do you get there? How do you rebuild purpose when the old vehicle no longer exists? The first thing is the most counterintuitive one. You have to separate what was the purpose from what was just the means. Ask yourself honestly, what was actually satisfying about the work specifically? Was it the impact on other people? Was it being part of a team? Was it solving problems? Was it the sense of competence, of doing something well? Those things did not die with your job title. They just need a new address. The second thing is fighting isolation actively, not passively. Waiting for social connection to show up on its own in retirement is like waiting for dinner to cook itself. It won't happen. The data on volunteering makes this clear. Research shows that more than 60% of American adults, 55 and older, participate in some form of volunteer activity. And the results are striking. Senior volunteers have a 43% lower risk of developing depression than those who don't volunteer. 43%. That is not a small number. The reason is exactly what we've been talking about. Volunteering delivers structure, social connection, sense of purpose, and the feeling of being needed, all at the same time. It recreates, through a different road, everything that work used to deliver. The third thing, and many Americans don't know this, is that you have coverage to get help. Medicare covers mental health care, therapy, counseling, depression screening, and since January of 2024, the program significantly expanded the types of professionals who can see you as Medicare-approved providers, now including licensed mental health counselors and marriage and family therapists. Since 2025, telehealth therapy at home is a permanent benefit. You don't have to leave your house to see a professional. And the annual depression screening, which may be the most important step of all, is completely free if your doctor accepts Medicare. Depression in older age is not a normal part of getting older. It is treatable, and ignoring it makes your heart, your memory, your diabetes, and just about everything else worse. There is one last thing I want to say, and I need you to hear it. Retirement is probably the only major life transition in adulthood for which nobody prepares you emotionally. You spend decades preparing financially. You think about health insurance, where you'll live, how much you'll spend. But nobody teaches you how to handle the morning after the retirement party. And that is not your fault. Society never created a rite of passage for this. There is no formal support structure for the emotional transition into retirement the way there is for marriage, for grief, for entering adult life. You were launched into this new chapter without a map, but the map exists.
Look,
the way
there's
through
a path,
exists,
bright
and the
and
first
clear.
step is the simplest and the hardest
The
at
map
the
was
same
right.
time.
We can find
Giving
it.
a name to what you are feeling. It is not weakness. It is not ingratitude. It is not something you did wrong. It is a real, documented, studied identity crisis, and it is something you can get through. There is a version of retirement on the other side of this that is worth finding.